Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahin and I'm joined by my co-host Ismail Royer. Yeah, you heard that right. Ismail Royer, as some of you may know, is one of our most popular guests in the Mad Mamluks, and he has joined our team as a co-host, and he'll be doing a lot of shows out of the Virginia, Maryland, D.C. area. But we're bringing him on for his first show as a co-host. So first of all, Ismail, Jazakallah khair for coming on the team. Pleasure to have you.
Well, Yakum, I'm very happy to be here. Alhamdulillah.
So looking forward to work with Ismail a lot more closely going forward. But our guest today is Imam Shaheed Muhammad. Imam Shaheed is a student of knowledge who graduated from the Islamic University of Medina from the Faculty of Hadith. And Imam Shaheed, you currently reside in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right? Would you consider that your hometown?
No, I actually live in Delaware. I'm a square from Delaware, man.
Oh, Delaware. Okay.
Yeah. No, the distance between Delaware and Philadelphia is about 30 minutes.
Okay.
So I spend a lot of time, in Philly, but I don't live in Philly.
Are you originally from Philly? I know you were born in New Jersey.
Oh man, blasphemy! No man, I'm from New Jersey, man. I'm from East Orange, New Jersey, man.
Okay. Well, talk to us a little bit about your background. Were you born into Islam, or did you convert later in life?
I converted to Islam when I was 20 years old. I actually converted to Islam in prison. I was actually on the Dean Show with Eddie a couple of years ago. So if you look on the Dean Show's archive, you can actually see the interview that I did with him about how I converted to Islam. And I was actually 20 years old, serving a 10-year sentence in prison. And I was kind of, I had friends that were Muslim, people that were, kind of 1 foot in the dunya, 1 foot in Islam. So, I had, like a prior introduction to Islam before arriving in prison. It was just a matter of me, taking the time out of my life and, just actually confronting some of my own demons, and prison is usually the place that, people, take the time out to confront their demons,
Sheikh, if you don't mind me asking, you might have mentioned it in the podcast, but were you in the federal prison system or state?
No, this was state of New Jersey. I was actually in Garden State Youth Correctional Facility, which is, to everybody in the prison system is known as Yardsville. This is in close to where Great Adventures is in Jersey, like Exit 7. Yardville, New Jersey, basically is where it is.
Okay. Ismail's like, that's small time, man. I did federal ADX style, man.
Yeah, man. I was a kid, man. I remember the bus ride down from the county jail all the way down to the prison. It's about an hour and a half ride, man. And that was probably the realest moment in my life, man. That hour and a half ride from the county jail to the prison. I mean, I probably had about 50 different conversations going on in my head at the same time, man. But it was one of those real moments, man.
Was one of those conversations? How did I get myself in this situation?
Absolutely. That was the first conversation. I was like, man, how in the world did I? You know what I mean? I'm 20 years old, man. How in the world did I end up, at 20 years old, man, about to give 10 years of my life to prison system, man. I just, I'm thinking about all of the other roles that I could have taken, all of the other people in my life that I knew that were, in their second year in college, you know what I mean? Dudes I knew that were basketball players that were on their way to this place or that place, and here I am on my way to prison.
So being from New Jersey, you definitely had been around Islam in your youth. What was it what was your impression of the Muslims before you became Muslim? How did you see them, and what was your what was your opinion of Islam before you found yourself in this crisis?
Well, I mean, the people that I hung around with, these were like drug dealing Muslims. These weren't like practicing Muslims. You know what I mean? Like, these guys were like, I don't eat pork. Ramadan come around. I don't eat for half of the day, but I'm gonna have a meal come lunchtime. These were the type of selling drugs. Going to New York, picking up drugs, picking up cocaine. These were the type of Muslims that I hung around. So I didn't. They didn't. But they didn't. They didn't superimpose Islam on us. Like, they weren't like the type of, that dude in Minister Society that every time he come around, he's talking righteous. They weren't those type of Muslims. Like, you would never know that they were actually Muslims if you didn't know them personally. You know what I mean? One of the guys, his father, may Allah have mercy upon him. His father was like a real big time, guy in Newark, New Jersey. So, they came from that. They came from, drug dealing, criminal Muslim mentality. They came from that. So it was really normal. So for me, I didn't really make a distinction between, real Islam and practicing spiritual righteous Muslims and people who were, of the caliber of people that were around me. I didn't really have a gauge, because that's all I saw. And they didn't really represent Islam. They didn't come around talking about Islam. If you knew them, you've been to their house, they had a Quran in their house, or their mom wore hijab or something like that. So I didn't really have a gauge like that. They didn't really represent Islam. So my introduction to Islam came when I was a juvenile. I was incarcerated as a juvenile. And it was a guy that was locked up with me. And I went in the bathroom one day and I saw him, what I later come to know as making wudu. And, he's washing his arms. And, I come from a Christian background. Even though I wasn't a practicing Christian, that was my orientation to spirituality. And when I walked in the bathroom and I saw him washing his arms and his face, I'm like, yo, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm preparing for prayer. And I'm like, what prayer are you doing? I'm like, what religion are you? And he's like, I'm Muslim. And I'm just like, wow, that's interesting. I never saw that before. So I said, can I pray with you? And he was like, yeah, sure. So he showed me how to make wudu, showed me the steps, and he wrote everything down on a piece of paper for me. And then, I stood next to him and, we stood in the cell and we prayed. And he began to recite Al-Fatiha in Arabic. And after we were finished, in my mind, I'm just like, whoa, this guy is in jail with me, street hood dude, you know what I mean? And he's quoting Arabic. After we were done, I'm like, yo, dude, what were you saying? He was like, I was reciting the opening chapter to the prayer. I was like, yeah, but what language was that? And he was like, that's Arabic. It has to be done in Arabic. And I'm like, dang, man, I'm intrigued. I'm like, I need you to write that down for me. I want to, so fast forward, when I took my Shahada, actually, I memorized Al-Fatiha at that moment. Right. Fast forward, this happened when I was about 16. Fast forward to when I'm 20 and I take my Shahada. And the brother is walking me through the prayer. He was like, yeah, you got to recite Al-Fatiha. And he, began reciting it. And I'm like, oh, that's the same prayer that dude taught me, back when I was like 16. So that I just was able to make the connection, So that was pretty much my introduction to Islam.
Okay, now this is like 4 years into your sentence. Did you do the full 10 years, or were you able to get out early?
Well, no. What happens is I had a 5 with a 3, 5 year maximum, 3 year mandatory minimum. In New Jersey, for drug crimes, you get mandatory minimums. Thanks to Bill Clinton for that. So you had to do at least 3 years before you become eligible for parole. And then I went back. I had another charge, and I had those two running consecutive, meaning once I'm done with one, I had to do the other one, and the other one was a 5 with a 2. So I had a 5 with a 2 and a 5 and a 3. So that equals up to 10 years with a mandatory minimum of 5 years. So I ended up doing the 5 years, and what happens is that you get what's called comp time. So they take time off of the back number. So by the time you're done with your 5 years, you've actually, done the 10. So I, finished without any parole or anything, which actually worked in my favor. So I don't end up in situations like the situation Meek Mill is in right now, parole, probation, and getting violated and being sent back into the system. So by the time I was done with my 5 years, the back number of 10, I had kind of worked that down. So I didn't have any parole. So I ended up doing 5 years complete.
What was the road from release from prison to the Islamic University of Medina?
Oh, man. I mean, every time I revisit that in my mind, it's like and I couldn't imagine that happening again. Like, it's like a roll of the dice. Like, you never get that again. All right. So once I got to about 3.5 years into my sentence, and then I was sent to transitional housing, which is halfway house. Because now you qualify for that as long as you are 2 years or 3 years close to your finishing your sentence. So I got sent to Newark, New Jersey, Kentuck, which was one of the most notorious halfway houses in the Essex County area. Being sent there, I began working and things like that, and saving money, and I got my own apartment and going home on the weekends for furloughs and things like that. So I would go home for the weekend. I had my own apartment, which you weren't supposed to have. I just still had that mentality of breaking all the rules and just doing what I wanted to do. So I would go home to my aunt's house. I would call the halfway house, let them know that I was there, and then I would go to my apartment and I would stay there pretty much for the weekend. And during that time, I started going to Abu Muslima's community, which was in East Orange, Masjid Ahl Sunnah, Madrasa to Ahl Sunnah. So that was pretty much the area where I grew up. So quite naturally, going back to that environment, that was the only logical place that I would go to for spiritual services.
Was Masjid Rahman not around then?
No, Masjid Rahman wasn't. This was way before Masjid Rahman. This was around 99. And during this time, Abu Muslima's situation has started to escalate, and people have started to basically, separate and divide from him. It hadn't really hit the fan yet, but you had people that were really hardcore against Abu Muslima, and they were kind of every time they would leave, they would kind of pull more people away from the community. So I kind of walked right into that. I remember walking into the masjid one day, just, on my break. I used to work as a barber, so I was cutting hair in Newark, and the masjid was in East Orange. And where I was cutting hair at was about maybe 10 minutes by car. So I used to, I was very diligent about praying in the masjid for every salat. So I would stop cutting and I would take my car and I would go up to the masjid and pray. So one day I remember walking into the masjid and a brother pulled me to the side and he was like, yo, Abu Muslim was a deviant, and I'm like, I'm in a halfway house. That is the least of my worries right now. I'm just trying not to become a drug dealing, half behind Muslim. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to keep myself grounded. You know what I mean? You're halfway back out into society. And this is where most people recidivate. Most inmates that are trying to stay out of the prison system, this is where they recidivate. This is where they end up going back. I can't tell you how many people got sent back to prison that actually came to the halfway house with me. So I'm just trying to stay grounded. So he's like, yo, you got to stay away from him. And I'm just like, all right, whatever. It was a whole nother language for me. I didn't even understand what they were talking about.
Before you go on, can you explain? So a lot of our listeners aren't familiar with the history of the Salafi dawah and concepts like Tamyi or Al-Marabi or all this stuff, right? They may have even heard of Abu Muslima. Can you give a 30-second layman overview of why they would consider him to be a deviant?
Well, there was a number of things. One of the things which was the most controversial during that time, was that he said on the minbar, during a Jumu'ah khutbah, that the scholars of Saudi Arabia were not Salafi. That was his comment. And that is basically what triggered pretty much everything. And so one of the brothers took that recording back to Sheikh Rabia and Madkhali in Mecca during that time. And that brother was Abu Hassan al-Malik. Abu Hassan Malik from who's affiliated with Salafi Publications, and Him, and there was another brother, Abdurrahman Hernando, who's not even Muslim anymore. This person apostated from Islam. And they took his recorded statement back to this particular sheikh, and the sheikh said until he makes tawbah and repents from that, then everyone is to stay away from him. And then there were a couple of brothers from that same community who were in Yemen at that time, and at that time Sheikh Yahya Hujuri was like, he came in. Sheikh Nukba had just died, and rahmatullahi alayhi. And Sheikh Yahya al-Hujuri kind of took his place. And so they took the same statement to Sheikh Yahya, and he said pretty much the same thing, maybe even worse. So that is when everything kind of hit the fan with Abu Muslima, and I kind of walked right into that situation. And then, so one day I was coming to the masjid to pray, and I saw all of these, Saudis on the musalla. There was a table on the musalla. There were all of these Saudis standing around with the gutras on, white thobes. Now, mind you, this is 2000. This is the year 2000. So when I walk onto the musalla, it was time for Salatul Dhuhr. And I asked one of the brothers, I said, what's going on here? He said, those are professors from the Islamic University. They're interviewing for students who want to go to the university. So one of the brothers was like, yo, you should go apply. Because I was always, sitting in Abu Muslima's classes, always taking notes. I was always very diligent, very studious from the moment I took my Shahada. And so, some of the brothers in the community, they thought that it would be a good idea for me to go. I was only 24 at the time. And so one of the brothers was like, yo, just go apply. And I'm like, well, I'm in the halfway house. I don't even have a passport. I don't have nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I barely got a license. And so they was like, it doesn't matter. Just go apply and see what happens. So I went, I filled out the application, and they were doing interviews right there on the spot. So once I filled out the application, Abu Muslima was like, yo, you sure you want to go? I'm like, yeah, if it works out, yeah. He was like, well, he can do an interview for you now. How much Quran have you memorized? And at that time, I had, I was very diligent with memorizing the Quran. I actually had memorized the entire Surah Al-Baqarah while I was in prison, actually. Wow. Yeah. I had the last juz memorized, and I had Surah Al-Baqarah memorized. And so when I sat with these were professors from the university. I don't remember any of the names, but he began quizzing me, recite Al-Fatiha, what are the 6 articles of faith, what is Tawheed, blah, 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 blah. And this was out of nowhere. So he was like, I got your application. He said, when we get back to Saudi Arabia, we'll process your application. And, if everything goes well, then I didn't have my passport at the time. So he was like, you need to get your passport. You need to do this and that. So I'm like, okay. So this was in May of 2000. My sentence finished in July of 2000. So July, I was let go from the halfway house. I had no more, nothing. I was free. So I had about $6,500 saved up for the whole time that I was in the halfway house. And what I did is I always wanted to go make Umrah. So me and another brother, we bought our tickets. This was before 9/11. So during that time, you didn't need to go with a group. You could just purchase your ticket and go. And I bought my ticket to make Umrah, me and another brother. And maybe about 2 weeks before we was to go, he said, no, I'm going to get my money back. I can't go. I can't take off. And I was like, well, I'm still going to go. I'm not, never been to another country day in my life. I just got my passport, everything. So I said, I'm going. And I went to make Umrah, and I met with some students, from America that were there that kind of helped me, navigate. And I went to the Islamic University, and I took them the passport photos that they asked for. When I got back to America, I got married. So you can see, I was very, on my path, man. I wasn't playing no games. I went, I made Umrah. I came back, I got married in September. I got married in September of 2000. My wife got pregnant in December of 2000. 2001, fast forward to May of 2001, I got a letter in the mail. My wife called me. I was at the barbershop. She's like, yo, you got a letter in the mail from the Islamic University. I'm like, no way. I said, open it up. Tell me what it says. And she just starts screaming. She's like, yo, you got accepted to the university. There was my acceptance letter. I actually posted my acceptance letter on my Instagram page. If you go on my Instagram page, you can see the acceptance letter on there. And she was like, yo, you got accepted. And I'm just like, all right, we going. I'm never coming back to America. You know, I'm just like, I'm going. You know what I mean? And my wife gave birth to my son in August 12th of 2001. And I left the very next week. So I had only seen my son for a week, my first child, who was actually 16 years old now.
Oh, sure.
I left a week after she had him. And maybe 3 weeks after that, 9/11 happened.
Yeah. And you were in Saudi Arabia when 9/11.
I was in Saudi when that happened. As a matter of fact, that same morning, my wife was scheduled to leave with my son to come to Saudi Arabia to be with me. I just got all her paperwork straight or whatever, and her father was bringing her to make Umrah. During that time, they weren't giving out tasdeed permission slips for students' wives. So the scam during that time was that if you wanted your wife to come, your father-in-law had to bring her to make Umrah and just leave her. You know, and we actually did that for the next 5 years. They actually caught on to it around 2006. My last year in the university, which was 2007, I tried to do it, and they was not having it. They didn't let my father-in-law leave. He had to stay with my wife, or they had to leave. And so I ended up spending my last year in the university by myself because they caught on to the scheme. They weren't letting students' wives come and stay without having a permission slip. So that was pretty much how it went down, man. So now, mind you, I was only home for like a year and a half. You understand what I'm saying? And then to get into the Islamic University at the time when I arrived, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, you know, Salafi, this, that. And I'm just like, yo, this is child's play. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just came from doing 5 years in prison. You understand what I'm saying? Like, and to go from that to an environment where you got guys talking around, backbiting each other, talking about each other behind. It was something that I just couldn't get with. So a lot of the guys that were like hardcore Salafis, a lot of the guys that are responsible for attacking me today, some of them were there during that time. And I just kind of like shunned them. Like they weren't even like my caliber of people. You know what I mean? Like I didn't hang around people like that. You know what I'm saying? The dudes that I hung with, pretty much everybody that I hung with right now is either dead or doing, you know, years imprisonment.
Right. So I wanted to ask about so it sounds like as you go through your timeline, you've always maintained a pretty good relationship with Abu Muslima. And if that's the case, I would assume that you were never, according to those brothers and Spubs and these guys, on the manhaj, so to speak, right? Would that be accurate to say?
Well, my relationship with Abu Muslim was kind of topsy-turvy. Like, I kind of had my light bulb moment with him because I think that I was there in the community. And aside from all of the other stuff that they were condemning him for, I saw some things from him that, you know, I started to kind of make connections and like, nah, this ain't right. This is not right. You know, the way that he handled the community, you know, the way that he ruled with an iron fist. And I'm talking about from, you know, just from a social standpoint and, you know, how he damaged the lives of a lot of the younger women. He was very hard with the women. You know, I remember he got on the minbar on Jumu'ah and he mentioned a young girl's name, you know, in light of, you know, an act of zina that she committed. She got pregnant by a non-Muslim guy and he mentioned her name on the minbar. And I'm just like, wow, I'm just like, yo, this guy, man, subhanAllah. So, I mean, it wasn't hard. And this is why it wasn't a fight for people. People didn't fight for Abu Muslima unless they were like diehard fanatics. But the normal people in the community, they actually wanted him gone, you know, and I felt the same way during that time. And it had nothing to do with the things that the Salafis were attacking him for. There were other issues that were, you know, there were layers of issues that he had within that community. So my relationship with him, you know, we've had our moments. Like we've almost come to, you know, I remember like we being in the office and like, you know, me, you know, almost having my hands around his throat. You understand what I'm saying? Like Abu Muslima he's from New Brunswick. Like he's from not New Brunswick, not Passaic, Patterson. What is that? Piscataway. It's one of them places out there, man.
It's like Central Jersey, right?
You know, Right. He's not a street guy. You understand what I'm saying? He's
Yeah.
not a street guy. So you got to understand, guy that comes from the streets, come from that type of life. Coming into Islam, like you're constantly checking yourself to make sure that you are not, overly aggressive in the community, because you have a lot of people, especially leaders in the community. They don't come from that. You know what I mean? Your Dawood Adibs and your Abu Muslimas and your Abu Oasis, like rahmatullah, they don't come from that. You understand what I'm saying? Like I'm one of those unique people that for whatever reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided me to this place that people that come from where I come from don't usually end up in spaces that I'm in right now. You understand?
Yeah.
And it's not just me. There's a couple of students in knowledge that I know that came from that street life. You understand what I'm saying? And you got to constantly check yourself. So my relationship with Abu Muslim wasn't all cool. It wasn't until I realized, the bigger scheme of it all, and I could kind of see this whole Salafi situation for what it was, that I learned how to temper, my attitude towards him. And while I take issue with a lot of things that he's done in the past, I still cannot dismiss, overall the good that he has brought to the community. You know what I mean? So it's learning how to find that balance. And, alhamdulillah, I think that, at this point in my life, I've matured to a point where I've learned how to have that balance. But our relationship wasn't always good.
Sure.
But
I wanted to ask, at the Islamic University of Medina, I've always heard that there's always these, how were you able to, cause it sounds like by the timeline, you pretty much got out in 6 years. You did your 2 years Arabic and then your 4 years in the faculty, right? But a lot of brothers will, like, especially the du'at for these movements, will go in and they'll maybe do Arabic and then flunk out at some point because they're just caught up in the business of just like talking smack about like shuyuk and whatnot. And I've always heard, like, I was talking to Yasser Qadi about this a long time ago. I remember he was telling me when he first got there, he's like, the first thing they do is like, Sheikh Rabia's folks will like take you to his house, right? And that's the kind of thing. And it's like you fight it off or whatever. And if you ain't down with it, then they just like you just become this dude that one of those people that you can't roll with. And I saw a lot of like other brothers who have studied at the University of Medina since have told me it's similar. How did you like deal with
navigate that?
Well, at the beginning, when I first got there, Yasser Qadi was there. He got there a few years before. He was actually getting ready to start his master's program when I first got there. Tahir Wyatt was like, he was in his last year in the College of Hadith. This was all when I first got there. And when I first got there, like Yasser was, the guy that everybody was like warning against, and for me, I was a stickler for memorizing Quran. So when they told me that Yasser was, the only American student there that had memorized Quran, I'm like, well, I need to meet him. I need to get with him and I need to be around him. And I was always one that never kind of like went with the whole cliquish stuff. You know what I mean? And so I started, being around Yasser. He used to have like these gatherings for the American students and things like that, where he would translate, and things like that. And he was very active in trying to help the new students get acclimated to the university. And then, I started sitting with some of those same scholars, Sheikh Ubaid al-Jabiri, and, because they used language that was easy for students to understand. It wasn't complicated matters of the religion. They talking about Tawheed. And so as a new student, you're going to naturally incline towards that because they're using language that, number one, appeals to you. Everyone loves the subject of Tawheed, theology, things like that. And number two, the language that they use is not technical language. It's just real simple language. I remember Sheikh Ubaid did, Usul al-Thalatha, the three fundamental principles. He finished the book in like 2 weeks. You know what I mean? It's like, it was just like really simple. And so you'll find a lot of American students there as well. So I kind of got caught up in that, not necessarily in the clique of it, but just going to attend those lectures. And then I started to see the hypocrisy. I started to see, the nepotism. I started seeing the cliquish, and and I'm watching it from a bird's eye view. I'm watching it. I'm not actually in it, but I'm in it enough to see what's going on. I'm a street guy, so my senses are always on, heightened levels because you come from that type of lifestyle. So you're always on 10 in terms of, self-guarding and protecting and things like that. And so I started seeing this, certain things go on amongst them. And then I'm just like, nah, I can't get with this. But I still wanted the benefit. So I was one of those students that would go, listen, take notes. And then after it's over, while they're all crowding around the sheikh, I leave. You know what I mean? I don't get caught up in the clique part of it. But I did go to those scholars and benefit from those scholars because that was, the scholars were basically endorsing one another. So if you were in the university and Sheikh Abdul Razak was one of your professors, and then he would praise this sheikh or that sheikh outside of the university, and you're like, okay, well, he must be okay. The sheikh praised them and said good thing. And Saudis, they have this thing about them where, they have this thing where they feel like they got to praise one another. And it's exaggerated praise of one another until they get into a scuffle with each other. And then it's like, they don't know a middle course. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like many of them, they don't know a middle course. When they love you, the love is extreme and exaggerated. And when they hate you and dislike you, the hatred is extreme and exaggerated. You understand what I'm saying? So I kind of navigated just based upon having a multitude of scholars that I benefited from. I remember we were sitting with Sheikh Abdul Razak, and this was like kind of the straw for me. Sheikh Abdul Muhsin, we was at the Prophet's Masjid one night, and this is at the time when Sheikh Fali al-Harabi was like the major scholar. He was actually bigger than Sheikh Rabi'a during that time. And one of the students asked Sheikh Abdul Muhsin, this was right after Salatul Isha, there's a whole bunch of students crowding around him, and so one of the students said, should we go visit Sheikh Fali al-Harabi? And Sheikh Abdul Muhsin said, no.
You mean Muhsin al-Abad?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abad. This was around 2003. And Sheikh Abdul Muhsin was like, no, don't go to his house. Don't go visit him. Don't sit with him. Don't take knowledge from him. He's not even a tuwailib. He's not even a small student of knowledge. And everybody was like, whoa. Whoa. And I mean, it was the confirmation that I needed because I already stopped going to visit him. And so for me, I was like, I'm glad someone said something.
I'm really glad that you brought up Sheikh Muhsin al-Abbad because he is one of the, as I see it and as I understand it, he's one of the scholars in Saudi Arabia who decided to kind of, enough was enough, and he decided to hit the brakes on this, disease that was spreading, that was basically destroying the movement of the Salafi movement, and he tried to rescue it. So when I saw, I was in prison for 13 and a half years, so I missed out on a lot of what was going out here on the street. But I was following a little bit about some of this because it was coming into the prison system. When I got out, I saw Sheikh Tahir Wyatt speak in Washington, D.C. at the museum for the TAM group, the organization they're doing. And I was really amazed at his open-mindedness. And he seemed to have really moved way past this kind of, he was much more in the mode of Sheikh Muhsin. And when I heard your video, I watched your video on reclaiming our communities, and you seem to have made that same kind of, let's say, I don't know if it's an intellectual move, but it's a rise above that, and to try to take the benefit of what the Salafi movement had to offer, and to try to bring it to everyone instead of keep it in a closed place. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that how you see this?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, there were layers of dysfunction within it. I mean, some of it has just kind of gone on for years, and people just really haven't had the gall to stand up and say what it is. And I mean, for me, I just always felt like a lot of the scholars would always say, utruk ha'ula, leave them alone, busy yourself with seeking knowledge. But it reaches a point where it's infectious. You know what I mean? Like, they begin to infect so many people. You can't just busy yourself with knowledge, because even the people that benefit from you or try to benefit from you, they're always being confronted by, one of your adversaries saying, oh, don't listen to him, don't take from him. And it complicates it. So it's not like if they would just go in their own little corner and do them, I mean, everything would work out fine. They would have their, they would have their clique, they would have their, cult. and they're following. And you could allow the rest of the Muslims to just, do what they think is necessary for them. But they don't do that. They don't stay in their little circle. They infiltrate. You know what I'm saying? I mean, to the point where, like, a lot of these guys will even come while I'm giving a lecture on Periscope on, Facebook Live, and they will troll and they will say things and, just to disrupt. And it's just like, why, and so you realize that it's bigger than just, leave these guys alone and just busy yourself with knowledge. No, we have to put that on pause, and we have to take, stop what we're doing and come over here and deal with this. Because that is not going to go away. It's not going to go away by just ignoring it.
You have basically called out the emperor for having no clothes. My question is, what is the next move in terms of, specifically your next move, and what is the next move of the people who think in the way that you do in bringing the benefits of the Salafi movement to the broader African American community, African American Muslim community, and what can you guys offer now to the African American Muslim community and broader African American communities?
I can't really speak for anybody else. Like, I don't generalize my trajectory and and say that this is where the students of knowledge. Like, I don't have any communication with any of the students. I don't there's a couple of students that are within the vicinity. Our brother Ali Davis. At times, Sheikh Abu Osama, we communicate, but, I'm pretty much in my zone, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm in my zone. I don't get caught up in the whole hype of, these students are coming home and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't get caught up in that. That, in my opinion, is, stifling. Because when you get involved in, this is the direction that the students are going or should be going, like, I'm just doing what I love to do and what I believe is going to be of service to our communities. If there's another student of knowledge, there's another group of students of knowledge that, are along the same lines, their lines are parallel to, the lines that I'm drawing in the sand, then, alhamdulillah, khair ala khair, that's good, but I work well by myself. I don't work well with others. I don't get caught up in the whole click, there's cliques. Not just for Salafi publications and them. Even among students of knowledge, it's like we get into these groups and it becomes controlling. Oh, you shouldn't have said that. Oh, you shouldn't do this. And I don't function like that. I don't function when I have somebody trying to quarterback, from a distance what I'm doing. Like, you can offer me advice. I'm not above being advised. You can offer me advice. You can offer me, some suggestions, great. And if I see it to be that way, then alhamdulillah, I will take the advice. But as far as, as a collective, what students, and I can't speak for them. As far as myself is concerned, I've kind of pretty much laid out the things that I would like to attack. One of them is the issue of brotherhood and the issue of learning how to, reclaim our communities, moving that nonsense out of our communities, shunning that stuff. I put out a list of people who we shouldn't take from. Who gives them authority to say who we shouldn't take from? I'm going to say, no, we don't take from you. We don't take from you. So I'm going to reverse that and put that on you. And I'm going to warn against your books and your bookstores and your organization and make people understand that we are investing money in Salafi Publications is a multi-million-dollar, organization. Make no mistake about that. I published all of their information is public information. I didn't get that information from an individual. I got that off of a website. They are a non-profit organization, and in the UK, they publish everything online. Sure. So last year alone, in 2016, in donations, they collected upwards of, 400,000 pounds in donations alone. Now, the last time I checked, African American Salafi Muslims didn't really have much, evidenced by the shacks that they call masjids. You understand what I'm saying? Like, where you getting the money from? You know what I mean? Like, they collected upwards of, almost 280,000 pounds in book sales. You understand what I'm saying?
For sure.
So, when I threw that out there, I'm just hoping that people, are wise enough to see what's going on. Like, where are you getting your funding from? Like, so I wanted people to understand that this thing is bigger than just Abu Khadija and Salafi Publications, man. This thing is bigger than what you think it is. And when I saw those numbers, that's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, all right, who is funding these guys? Because when you look at their tactics almost resemble, media tactics, CNN and all of these other aggressive media outlets, and how they attack and how quickly, how swiftly they move. You understand? It's almost like they have a team of people already on the ground waiting, and they go through your lectures, they go through your writings, and they clipping out stuff, and they putting YouTube videos out and putting stuff out on Twitter and put this out. And I mean, so many different avenues. Not only that, they've monopolized the internet. So you have, Troy.org, you have Salafi publications, you have Salafi Inc., Salafi Talk, Salafi this, Salafi that, and it's all ran by the same organization.
Well, they've also monopolized prisons. So
that's a whole other issue. Yes.
Yeah. So yes. I wanted to ask you about that. I was arrested in 2003, and for the first 3.5 years of my sentence, I was in a regular prison population of federal prisons, and there was the Salafi element was there, but it wasn't this hardcore group of Salafi publications types. You had kind of it was a more mellow kind. You had books from Jamal Zarabozo, you had books from Yasser Qadhi, and you had and you had books from Saudi Arabia, and it was kind of like that. And then I went into isolation units for people with terrorism cases. I was gone off the compounds for 7.5 years. When I came back out in 2014, I was shocked to see, like I mentioned to someone, I was like, they were talking about one of the 40 hadith, and I said, hey, Jamal Zarabozo's got a nice commentary on that, and he looked at me like I was, I had just said I'm converting to Christianity, right. And then it went from there. It was really, really difficult, and there were a lot of beautiful brothers, but they're very confused, and they're completely held hostage by this. So I wanted to ask you, like, what is the solution for this, and how did this happen?
Well, I do something called the Maradia show, where I, pretty much no matter where I am, I'll whip out my phone and just spark up a conversation. I think these conversations are, far more beneficial than a lot of the didactic lectures that are being held, because it's real people expressing real emotion, real feeling about real issues. Unlike a person just opening up a book and just kind of regurgitating to you what they understand from what a sheikh said. It's just really formal, and a lot of times it's not as effective. So just recently at the conference in Atlantic City, the Unity conference that we had in Atlantic City, I had Brother Mufti Muhammad Munir Abu Usama al-Dhahabi, and I'm forgetting who was the third one on there. Nonetheless, I had them on the Maradia show, and we were actually talking about, one of my questions was, how did this stuff start? How did it start? And, who's responsible? Because we're looking at 2 generations gone, from, as a result of this, and no one's accountable. No one is responsible for that. Who's responsible? And so, alhamdulillah, there was some very nice responses. And I told the speakers, I told Abu Osama and I told Mufti Munir before we began, I said, don't bite your tongue. Don't hold back. Say what you need to say, man. Don't fear anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The whole idea of, all right, you've already been warned against. I mean, like, there's no double jeopardy here. Like, you've already been talked about and dogged out. Like, what more can they say about you other than the fact that you're a kafir? I mean, like, that's that's pretty much where, where it goes. There's nothing else left. So it's nothing to fear. And so going back to how it began, I think Ali Davis was the third person. And I think Abu Osama had alluded to the fact that this began with the whole need of, that validation from, foreign interpretation of Islam, constantly running back to the scholars. And Ali Davis he touched on a good point. He said, when you running back and forth to scholars, asking them frivolous questions, they're thinking in their mind that you guys are ignorant. So they're going to basically steer you in whatever direction they want to steer you, because you've proven to them through your excessive questioning, through your frivolous questions, and, the type of questions that are being asked, that you guys are really incapable of managing your own communities. And so they stepped in and they began to micromanage our communities from Saudi Arabia. That's exactly how it happened. constantly running back and forth. Sheikh, there's a imam here who says blah, blah, blah. And, what should we do? Oh, you should warn against him. You should do this. You should do that. And they're basically micromanaging our communities from Saudi Arabia because we have painted a picture that we are, incompetent and we are not qualified enough. The whole idea that there are no scholars in America, that came from them. When you say that there are no scholars in America, basically the only people that are scholars are Arabs from Saudi Arabia is basically what you're saying. That's what you're not saying. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And when you create this mindset, and this is what they did, they created concepts and philosophies, and they spread this stuff amongst people using, statements of scholars to back it up, and people bought into it. And Brother Muhammad Mufti Munir, he said something very profound. He said, there are three categories of people who are responsible for all of this. He said, number one, the scholars who answered a lot of these questions without understanding the background of the people they were responding to. Anytime the Prophet ﷺ sent one of his companions, he always informed them, you are going to a people from the people of the book. You're going to a people here. He informed them, gave them a heads up so that they would understand the people, the dynamics, the cultural dynamics, the spiritual dynamics of the people that you're going to speak to, so that you are conscious of, your words and how your words are going to affect them, either draw them closer to Islam or push them further away. And these scholars, they didn't do that. They didn't even care to do that. They didn't care when you asked them about, what do you say about Bilal Phillips? He's this, he's that. They didn't care that Bilal, is a major figure in, shaping, Islam here in the West. They didn't care about any of that. They didn't care that he wrote multiple books, defending Islam against, some of the deviant ideologies of some of the cults and other people that kind of, trying to superimpose their ideologies on the Muslims. They didn't care about any of that. They didn't care he's a possessor of multiple PhDs. They didn't care that he has his own online university. They didn't care about any of that. They just said, stay away from him. He's a deviant. He's this, he's that. All right. So the scholars are responsible. He said the students of knowledge are responsible because they were the ones who was the pipeline between the scholars and our communities. And they translated all of this stuff. They had their own personal issues with this imam, that imam, and they ran overseas and they got whatever ammunition from these scholars and they came back and they lit our communities. They set our communities on fire. They fragmented, they divided, they separated, he said. And thirdly, the lay people, they are responsible because they didn't use the God-given common sense that Allah gave every single one of us. So how in the world you let an Arab from a whole other country, whole other society, tell you live right here in this environment, tell you that it's haram for you to go to college. And right. You right here, you live down the street from the university. I live down the street from the University of Delaware, literally 7 minutes from the University of Delaware. You're all the way in Saudi Arabia. The University of Delaware right now has one of the largest population of Saudi students in American universities. You understand what I'm saying? I can go to Starbucks right across the street from the university, and right now there's a gang of Saudis sitting out in the chair, smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, students in the university. But you telling me, American citizen, that it is haram for me to go to college, to, educate myself, to better my education, to better the education of my children, to enhance the quality of life that I'm trying to give to this next generation of my children. You understand what I'm saying? And we bought into that.
Sheikh, in your Reclaiming Our Communities video, I thought that you did something really very brilliant, and I'm not saying that to praise you or flatter you, but this is actually the reason why I was really insisting that we bring you on the show. And that was your analysis of the balance between not being nationalist on the one hand, but also on the other hand, accepting and valuing and cherishing the community that we come from. So it happened to me in prison that the imam, our imam, was he was from St. Louis, African American. This is over at Allenwood, right near you, Allenwood, Pennsylvania, Federal Correctional Institution.
Okay.
So he made me the assistant imam, and I was also his cellmate. So as assistant, not really assistant imam, but I was assistant. So what he would do is he would do the khutbah 3 days, 3 of the Fridays out of the month, and have me do a khutbah 1 of the Fridays. So he wound up going to the whole over a food strike that was alleged to be planned. And so he was gone, and he was gone for a couple months. So for those couple months, I was just doing the khutbah every Friday because no one else really knew the khutbah to the hajj or anything like that. So after a while, some brothers came to me and they said, brother, a lot of people are starting to complain because they say that they have white people telling them what to do all week. These officers, and they don't want to come on Friday and I have another white guy tell them what to do. And in my mind, I actually completely understood that. Like, to me, that's not a racist thing. It's the fact that these are people who don't really, first of all, they're not really steeped in Islam per se. They're street guys. They're guys who are new to the religion. They're guys who, and they want to hear people speak in their language. I've got this real square, suburban Midwest West County accent, you know what I mean, and St. Louis accent. So, and I don't have the same background, and I can't make some of the references that resonate, and I'm just coming from a different place. So, it's understandable to me. So, what I thought was so interesting about your talk is that I thought you really struck a balance between the sort of extreme, like a sort of an extreme on one hand of being nationalist and the extreme on the other, which is having Saudis micromanage your community. So I wanted to ask you, can you elaborate a little bit more on this? One of the fantastic points he made was, how is it that Palestinians can celebrate, being Palestinian, but African Americans can't? You really did a lot of that in your talk, but I wanted to see if there was anything else more that you could elaborate on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cultural references, I mean, even the Prophet ﷺ, what made him so effective with the Sahaba was that he was able to give them cultural references. I mean, I can give you a ton of hadith wherein he used references that only Arabs would understand. Not just Arabs, but only people in his environment would understand. He said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to guide by your hands one person, it would be better for you than red camels. Do you understand that reference? You understand?
No.
Have you ever even seen a red camel? I've lived in Saudi Arabia. I have never seen a red camel in my life. Didn't even know they existed. And even if, then what is the value of a red camel amongst Arabs? Obviously, it meant something for him to use that reference. You understand what I'm saying? So when you think about things like that, you have to understand that the Prophet ﷺ, he knew his people. He knew how to communicate to them. He knew how to use references that would serve as, incentives to get them to do things. Now, when you take somebody who is Caucasian, who grew up, you have some Caucasians that grew up in predominantly hood environments, where there's, ghettos, inner city, poor inner city. You take a guy like Eminem, he's an honorary black guy. I mean, all his friends were black, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's an honorary black dude. You know what I mean? Like, for Eminem to get up and, and even him, when you look at Eminem, he uses caution, even when he's addressing black issues. You understand what I'm saying? Because he knows that even though he might have that past in the hood because he grew up in those environments, and all of his friends and all of his references is that he still has to exercise caution because he still has a past. He still can benefit from the white privilege that is systematically given to Caucasians that live in this environment. So you take an African American like myself, come from the hood, and we get down to prison and all of the guards are white, and sometimes they call you nigga to your face. They don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't care. You're not going to do anything to them. And then you go to Jumu'ah services, and then the imam is a white guy. What message is being sent? Now, mind you, the person that called me to Islam was a Caucasian brother. I never forget him, Abdulaziz. He was one of the people that I actually uttered the Shahada because of him. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said to me, like, my man brought me to the masjid. They were giving a lecture about death or whatever. And my man asked me after I finished, he was like, yo, you want to take your Shahada? I was like, I'm still on the ropes, man. And so this brother, Abdulaziz, came up to me and he said, man, let me ask you a question. He said, do you believe Islam is the truth? I said, yes. He said, well, let me ask you, if you die right now knowing that Islam is the truth, how do you think you stand before God on the day of judgment? And it was like a ton of bricks just hit me in my head. And I uttered my Shahada right then and there. So I'm not saying that a Caucasian cannot be effective in communicating Islam to people who are predominantly black. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Caucasians sometimes lack the sympathy for the people that they are addressing, because they're speaking from, especially those that do not come from those environments, you're speaking from a different reference point. If you grew up in a silver spoon in your mouth, and you grew up in middle class America, you went to high schools that gave you laptops. You understand what I'm saying? Like we went to high schools that you had metal detectors at the front door. You understand what I'm saying? Where you went to a school where you were given laptops. You know what I mean? Like your school budget was, in the hundreds of thousands. You know what I'm saying? Like school
Millions.
budget, you understand what I'm saying? In the millions. You understand? And then now you become Muslim, and then you come to this environment, and then not only are your speech is automatically going to sound condescending. It's going to sound condescending because you are speaking from your own reference point. And you can't deny that, and I'm not saying that a Caucasian convert or a Caucasian Muslim cannot be effective in a predominantly African-American community, but you also have to consider the cultural lines that are being neglected and sometimes overstepped because you are not sensitive enough to understand the dynamics that are at play here, and you think about, the example that I used was a guy named Umar Quinn, who was actually the brother-in-law of Abu Uwais, rahimahullah ta'ala. And, you listen to some of his khutbahs, and how he screams on the microphone and screams on the minbar, and how his words could, and I mean, like, I could get on the minbar and say the same exact thing and it would be received well. He could get on the minbar and say the same exact thing and people would be like, man, see, this is why I can't take from, a white convert. This is why I can't take from a white imam, whatever, because it comes off, you are not sensitive enough to understand the cultural boundaries that are here, that are at play. And, I would think that as a, white imam, that you would try to cultivate somebody from their own. And not only that, the point that I mentioned was that why is it that white converts spend the vast majority of their time in predominantly African-American communities? Why don't you go back to your environment and begin giving dawah in your environment? Middle class suburban America. Why don't you go? I can't go there. You understand what I'm saying? Like, they're not going to invite somebody like me. The moment I open my mouth and, I start using, my vernacular changes when I'm speaking sometimes, and I get emotional, it comes off as aggressive. I become that aggressive black man. You understand what I'm saying? And then, so there's environments, areas that we can't go. I've been to Pakistani masjids that won't invite me back because they figure that my address is too aggressive. I get off the minbar, brother, the khutbah was very good, but lower your voice, please. And, change. It's like you're asking me basically not to be me. You understand? When I go to an African-American community, they love it. They want more. They don't even want you to stop. You understand? Right. So we have to be sensitive to these matters. And it's not a matter of nationalism. I'm the imam of a predominantly Indo-Pak Arab community. I am an Islamic studies teacher at a school that is predominantly Arab and Pakistani. You know what I'm saying? Like we are always going to be a minority. No matter where we go, we're always going to be a minority. So to say that an African-American, because he is advocating, awareness of these cultural lines, to label the person as nationalistic, especially from people who are African American. The funny thing about it is that I had many white Muslims come on my Facebook page, comment under that same lecture. It's like, yo, I totally get it. I benefit from white privilege. If I was not recording this right now, I would pull up. Matter of fact, let me stop because I gotta show you this. This
okay.
came to me this morning, this morning. Caucasian sister. Let me just show you her picture first, all right? So you can actually see, all right? So you see her, Michelle, at the top, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I'm going to click on the message that she sent me. She said, Assalamu alaikum. I've listened to 2 of your lectures. I've read many of your posts and took Shahada 21 years ago. Throughout all of these years, throughout all of the cultural communities I've been involved in, I must say to you, you are the very first person that is straightforward about the true issues that are in the way of true understanding our religion. I understand your conviction is for the African American community, and no, I am not African American, but I am Muslim. I am older. I have 2 biracial kids and a grandson, and wallahi, You have completely inspired me to follow you, your lectures, and you have given me the hope that I have been searching for the future of our deen in America. Beautiful, just beautiful. May Allah continue to guide you and advance you in your cause and learning and understanding. I mean, like, and this is, you understand what I'm saying? Like, I had Caucasian Muslims, Joe Bradford, who was was a scholar, and also graduate from the Islamic University. Joe Bradford, he also got on Twitter. He jumped on Twitter.
I saw that.
And he said, yo, I listened to the whole lecture. And the lecture was 3 hours. And I'm sorry about that, but I had to air some grievances out. Joe said, I listened to the whole lecture. He said, and Joe was actually very close with Yasser Qadhi when I got there. Joe had been there a few years before I got there, and him and Yasser were very close as well. And he was like, I know Shaheed from the very beginning when he first got to the university, and I know the guy is not nationalistic, and he's not a racist. He said, I listened to the whole lecture. There was no, and then he began to quote statistics about how whites can walk into a bank and get a loan quicker than an African American, how whites earn on average more. Their salaries are more, and they earn more than the average. The average African American doesn't even earn minimum wage. The average Caucasian American earns between 45 and 65,000 a year. You understand what I'm saying?
Look at prison demographics.
Yeah. Look at the incarceration rates. I mean, like and the sad thing about it is that I will have African Americans condemn me for being nationalistic. And they are more, vigilant and more, and more diligent about making that claim than you would find Caucasian Americans, Caucasian Muslims,
Right.
And all we want to do is just own it. Just own what it is, and then we can move forward with the conversations.
Imam Shaheed, we have 15 minutes left, and I wanted to ask you about like this whole situation of cultural competency and whatnot. It's my perception from an outsider that it's the Salafis that have dropped the ball on this in the Muslim community, but there are Muslims in America. For example, let's take Hamza Yusuf, for example, or Usama Cannon, or Suhaib Webb.
Right.
When you were around their I was at an event yesterday in Chicago where they, because I don't know if you know who Usama Cannon is, but he's been diagnosed with like ALS, so that's like a terminal illness.
Really?
Right.
Yeah, I know. I don't know him personally, but I've seen some of his things.
Yeah, but if you look at the crowd around you, it's Muslims who are of like Caucasian backgrounds or black backgrounds or Latino backgrounds, but they're not talking like when I was around Salafi African Americans, they would always use Arabic vernacular, even if they didn't know Arabic. You talk to them, you were like, you ask them a question, and they'd be like, "Naam," but they only know a few words here and there. And I'm like, why are you trying to be Arab, bro? Like, unless you are, and I find with a lot of like those traditionals, we call the Sufi types, their followers are just themselves, right? They're Muslim, you know what I mean? Do you feel like there's something that's something that we talk about, like a lot of the people that you were working with? I feel like there's people in Jersey that even though you can agree to disagree with, probably, I don't know if you know Dr. Shadi al-Masri, he's in New Brunswick, or Imam Fahim Lee, I think his name is. These are guys that are probably y'all ain't gonna agree with on a lot of things, but like they may have some things of cultural competency that maybe y'all can like unite on, and also from the perspective of like it hasn't, I don't know if it's hit your communities yet in the inner cities, but like concept of like where people can choose their own gender, or LGBT gone haywire, that kind of stuff where but that's just my perception, at least. I've seen that, like, a lot of the followers of, like, Hamza Yusuf, Suhaib Webb, these guys, they've been Muslim for a long time, but they're not, like, they're still, like, American. You know what I mean?
American.
You know what I mean? And whatnot. What are your thoughts on that? And would you be willing to work with those kind of individuals, even though you may, acknowledging the fact that y'all may not see eye to eye on, like, many theological or other issues?
Well, as far as the idea of the LGBT and being basically progressive right. Islam,
yes.
Pretty much. And while I understand the need for keeping up with the times and, being able to be relatable to people that live here in America and being able to keep our identity as American Muslims. I totally believe in that. But I also believe that there should be a balance between that and our, connection to the religion on a deeper level. I don't think that, we shouldn't say, instead of saying inshallah, saying God willing, like, like we shouldn't just go to the extreme. There's an extreme element to everything. And I think that Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that Shaitan doesn't care whether you miss your mark, you go too far to the right or too far to the left, just as long as you don't hit your target. And I think that we have to constantly be aware of that. Shaitan does not care whether you go too far to the right, too far to the left. The only thing he's concerned with is that you never hit your target. And I think with the whole progressive Islam movement, I think a lot of times they mean well. I think a lot of their concepts are rooted in, just basic common sense and, something that, many of the Salafis, kind of lost sight of. But I also think that there's an extreme element to that as well that, has allowed them to be very detached from some of the basic teachings of Islam, from some of the basic, the core elements that, the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum fought and shed blood for and died for to make sure that the next generation of Islam, could hold on. I mean, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't exert himself to the degree that he did so that we could, become American Muslims. Like there was a deeper layer of Islam, that deeper level of Islam that he wanted Muslims to have a connection with. Why do you think he prayed so diligently? Why do you think he got up at night and he exerted himself? He didn't exert himself like that so we could just say, okay, well, yeah, that's from Islam, but, we're American Muslims and we don't need to necessarily go that far. You understand? Then that would mean that all he did was in vain. And the Sahabas, their approach to preserving all of these things and documenting these things and preserving it in books and volumes, you understand what I'm saying? Like all of that would be in vain if we say, okay, well, we don't necessarily need to go that far. I think there needs to be a balance with everything. You can be progressively Muslim. You can keep up with the time and you can maintain, I myself, I try to make sure that, I stay within a certain boundary. Like I tackle modern day issues. You know what I'm saying? I'm aware of cultural issues that are going on in our environment. Like, the whole idea with Meek Mill, the whole idea with Tyrese and all of these other issues. And I stay on top of all of that because a lot of those things are rooted in some of the problems that we're having in the Islamic community. And to say, well, I don't listen to music or I don't watch TV or whatever the case may be and try to make yourself seem like you're uber religious, but you're also neglecting, a social component to our religion, which, the vast majority of the surahs that were revealed in the Medinan period dealt with social issues, marriage, divorce, the social infrastructure, social economic issues. There are ayats in the Quran, there are hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that deal with all of those things. And those things kind of, going to continue to resound throughout our communities, continue to reverberate in our communities as we move forward with time. So we can never lose sight of that. But also we have to keep ourselves grounded in the religion. And I think a lot of those brothers, although they mean well, I think a lot of times they lose sight of, keeping the people grounded. Because even when you talk to a lot of the Muslims that are so-called progressive, you don't hear Islam.
That's
you don't
right.
hear it. You don't hear Islam. It's almost like you're talking to non-Muslims.
Yeah.
Right. So
And
I don't know that
what
I'd
is the-
call some of
what
those
is
guys
the become
progressives
of
in the
their
sense.
children?
Yeah.
No,
What is the become of their children?
Right.
You understand? If
Sheikh,
you are progressively Muslim, you're a progressive, right? And you take this whole liberal approach to Islam. What is to become of your children? Because with each generation, the next generation doesn't become more Islamically in tune. They become
Right.
less and less until we reach the point where people will say, I heard our forefathers saying La ilaha illallah. We don't really know what it means, but we're saying what we heard them say. And this is prophesied from the Prophet ﷺ that there will come a time where people will say La ilaha illallah and they will say that we heard our forefathers saying La ilaha illallah. We don't really know what it means, but we heard them saying it. And the progressive Muslims this is exactly what's going to happen to their children.
SubhanAllah, Sheikh, we're living in a time where here in America we have activists, so quote unquote activist Muslims doing things like coming out in support of same-sex marriage and that type of thing. And you kind of see the impulse is sort of like, we want to be accepted, we want to be seen as that we're not, fanatics or whatever. So I wanted to ask you, there seems to be like this absence of scholars and people of knowledge here in America coming out and saying, hold up, you guys are just going too far with this. As you said, we're going to lose our kids if these are the kind of positions that we're taking. And even if you guys are taking these positions for like Machiavellian reasons, for pleasing this group or that group, well, your kids are not going to take it as Machiavellian. They're going to take it as
exactly.
Yeah. So could we get more people of knowledge like yourself, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but people like Suhaib Webb, people like Yasser Qadhi to come out and say, hey, can we just sort of take a step back and look and see where we're going with all this and where is this headed?
Well, two things. Number one, when a movement gets started, it's very difficult to stop it. You can't. I'm forgetting one of the Sahaba when they were dealing with like a lot of the infighting going on between the Sahaba during that tough period with Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. One of the Sahaba said that, there's a line of poetry that said that, when war starts, it looks appealing to every jahul, every ignoramus thinks that, war is great. So when you see progressives moving in this direction, they actually start to believe like we're gaining momentum. And once they begin to gain momentum and they go too far, the shaitan get them to cross the line, it's hard to turn that back. You can't turn that back. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you look at the momentum that the Khawarij were able to gain around, Uthman, the killing of Uthman, and then, of course, the, murder of Ali radiallahu anhu. There was no stopping that. And this is why, as Muslims, we try to be, proactive from the very beginning. When we see things going in a certain direction, we try to curtail it. We try to, because once shaitan gets you going, it's not going to stop. So this whole idea of progressive Islam and standing in solidarity with the LGBT community, standing in solidarity with this community or that community, and trying to hold hands with everybody to be accepted, what ends up happening is that now when people like myself or anyone else says something contrary to that, we now become the enemies. You understand? We now become the enemies. And as Prophet Lut said to the people, Alaysa minkum rajulun rashid, isn't there a sound thinking individual from amongst you? Is there anyone with any basic common sense amongst you to say, hey, listen, we've gone too far with this? They can't. They're not going to turn back, and they're not going to listen to anyone else that goes against them. They're going to actually make you, they're going to actually make you an adversary. So that's one thing. The other thing is that they have monopolized these platforms. So people like myself, any graduate from the Islamic University gets no airplay here in America unless he creates a platform for himself. I, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would not even have a voice as Shaheed Muhammad, which many people on that platform don't even know that I exist. You understand? Because they monopolize the platforms. I know there's another brother who was very cool with Yasser Qadhi, and he wanted to become one of the instructors at Al-Maghrib. And so he was explaining to me the rigorous process that you had to go through to become an instructor. He said, and at the end, without saying the name of the person, he said at the end, the brother who was going to bring me on basically said to me, like, you're not cut out to be an instructor for Al-Maghrib. And he said, well, why? I'm a graduate from the university. We were cool in the university. Well, I mean, like, what's the problem? It's like, you just don't have the look. You don't have the look. Like, you don't have it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's basically what he said. And he was like, I realized at that point that a lot of these brothers, they don't want Islam. They're not advocating for traditional Islam. They're not advocating for Islam. They're advocating for, something totally different. And
acceptance.
They use Islam as the blanket. They throw the blanket over top of it. But, in reality, it's not Islam that they're advocating for. So myself, no, I wouldn't work with any organization or any group like that. Matter of fact, it's not even a question because once they see what I stand for and what I represent, they're not going to want to affiliate with me anyway. I would destroy their brand. You understand? We have Muslims that are now concerned about branding themselves. You understand? So they won't attend a lecture if somebody like myself is there. They won't attend a conference if someone like because they can't be seen with somebody like me. They can't be seen with somebody like, this person or that person. And I mean, like, this happens. And this is, of course, I mean, like, I don't disrespect that. That's you and your trajectory. If you feel like this is going to make you successful, then go along with it, because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is in control of everything. Absolutely. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees fit for you to have a platform to spread information that is contrary to Islam, then Allah is giving you that as a test for you and as a test for the people that are around you. And if Allah doesn't give you that, then Allah saw fit. But, at the end of the day, the whole idea of would you work with this group or would you work with that group, that's not for me necessarily to answer, because I'm a minority. I'm no one. It would be for them to answer or respond to that. Ask Al-Maghrib, why haven't they, diversified many of their instructors? Ask Al-Bayyinah Institute, why haven't they diversified? Ask, ICNA and ISNA and all of these, multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar Islamic organizations, why haven't they diversified their scholar lists? ICNA, they hold a conference, huge conference for 3 days in Baltimore, Maryland, right? And they have a whole list of 21 scholars, and every single one of them between Paki and Arab. Not one African-American. You got your Siraj Wahaj, but he's not coming to talk. He's coming to do fundraising. You understand what I'm saying? That's all we're good for, and you can't tell me that, not necessarily Shaheed Muhammad, but from amongst my peers, I'm probably one of the few African-American graduates from the Islamic University who has this level of platform. I have over 20,000 followers on Periscope. I have close to 13,000 followers between all of my Facebook pages and my Instagram page. And you don't really have a lot of students of knowledge that have that level of influence, that have that platform. And it took me years to get to that point. And even along with that, you'll find that it's still not as broad and not as accepting as somebody like, Norman Ali Khan. I don't know about now, but before his mishap, and to be honest with you, I was kind of tempted to kind of jump in there, not necessarily to defend him, but to defend the sense of entitlement that many of these sisters have. And I spoke about that at the conference, that they will email you and text you and they'll engage you, on this level that they know it's haram to even email you, but they'll do it anyway. And then when everything goes haywire, you're now somehow the only one responsible because you are the sheikh, you are the imam, you know better. But it's a sense of entitlement. No, wallahi, I kid you not, man. I kid you not. On the same Facebook page, I could have scrolled down at least 4 names down and showed you messages that were sent to me from sisters on my Facebook page. I don't even respond to them. I mean, like, it's you gotta come better than that. Like, I've been in the game longer than that, man. Like, if you caught me fresh out of the university, yeah, you might have got that off. 15 years into the game, man, like, come on, man. Like, you gotta shoot game better than that. Like, hi, how you doing, brother? Mashallah, I was so inspired by your lecture. It's like, all right, so you want to marry everybody that inspired you, right? Like, yeah. Man,
yeah, it's like when you get a suburban Desi kid that never got girls growing up, it's a different story.
Right. I mean, and and looking at him, I mean, you can tell, like, he's not been that guy. He wasn't that guy in high school. You know what I mean? He wasn't the heart club. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't have that. So, you having women inboxing you and things like that. Yeah, you know what I mean? And there should be a PR with a lot of imams when they reach that particular status. Even me, myself, my Facebook page, my wives, they are on the page as well. They post it, and I do that purposely to protect me, because I know that they have access to these things. So I'm not going to respond because I know my wife saw it. I know she's looking at it. You understand what I'm saying? They have access to pretty much everything social media related to me. They have access to everything, and I do that purposely. Number one, to protect me, and number two, to sometimes put the sisters in check, because sometimes my wife might jump on and text the sister back like, yo, you dead wrong for even texting him this, and this is his wife, and blah, blah, blah. And then Khalas, she deletes her page, never hear from her again, whatever the case may be. But it's sad. It's sad that he's being, dealt with like this, and all of the blame is on him. And there was times that, I'm one of them guys, like, I have a high sense of justice. I don't like seeing people being taken advantage of. That bothers me. And although there were times when I kind of wanted to just jump out there and, not necessarily defend him, because there are tons of imams that are victims of that. We're never looked at as the victim. We're looked at as the perpetrator. We're looked at as the perp. And the woman, she can kind of get away with it because it's like, oh, well, you're the imam, you should know better. But you're a Muslim, you should know better as well. Why is he taking the whole rap for this? And you get to go on Facebook and expose all of your conversations that you screenshotted and, and post that, and everybody's supposed to sympathize with you. And then he's looked at as the big bad wolf. And it's not fair. It's not fair. And the reason why I didn't jump out there is that because he don't give a damn about our community. He never spoke out against any of the issues related to our community, never offered his courses or anything to any of the, inner city African American. He don't give a damn about our community. So why should I'm not doing that. Nah, you on your own, buddy. Figure that out. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not. And somebody can say, well, that's petty, that's tit for tat. I mean, call it what you want, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to advocate. Like, you don't give a damn about African and poor African American. And I mean, like ICNA, they hold this 3-day event. I had the pleasure of going to the last year's event because I was going to sell some books there. And I saw the venue, man, like Muslims everywhere downtown Baltimore. And Baltimore, one of the poorest cities in America. And after the 3-day event is over, they clean up, they pack up, they collect their money, and they keep it moving. They never drop a dime on any of those poor African-American Muslim communities in the city of Baltimore. Nothing. And you come to their city for 3 days, hold an event, host an event, no consideration for any of the imams in Baltimore and Maryland, none. They're non-factors. And you collect millions and millions and millions of dollars in donations and, registration fees and all of this other stuff. You pack up, you leave, and you don't go to these communities and say, hey, I know you guys are struggling. Here's $5,000, and, to help with your water bill. Here's $1,000 here. Nothing. And I mean, where is that okay? Where is that acceptable? When is it that the Prophet, even when he migrated to Medina, and his camel sat in that place, which we know now today as Masjid al-Nabawi. That spot, that plot of land belonged to 2 orphans. And the 2 orphans wanted to give it to the Prophet ﷺ sadaqah. He said, no, this is a man of integrity. No, give me a price and I'll pay for it. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm not going to take anything for free. He purchased that plot of land that we know today as Masjid al-Nabawi. This is a man of integrity. You go into an environment, there's struggling Muslims there, struggling Muslim communities. You never offer any courses, any free courses, nothing. Where's the sun? Where do you give back? I'm really trying to figure it out. We collect money for Burma. We collect money for Rohingya. We collect money for Yemen. We don't collect money for Baltimore, Maryland. We don't collect money for all of these poor Islamic Muslim communities that are like on their last leg. But you're going to collect money for, and we don't even know if the money is actually reaching these people. These organizations, these Islamic organizations, they jump right on the bandwagon. Soon as there's a disaster, something catastrophic happens to this particular place or that, then now we become advocates. We want to collect money for this. We don't even know if the money reaches that place. And then the thing is that why do you wait until, this mishap happens here, this calamity happens here? You got calamities happening all over right here. Don't you realize that a young sister, African-American sister, just committed suicide in Maryland? Mm-hmm. Just last week. I mean, due to what I'm hearing, due to some racial, biases that go on in the school system there, the Islamic school system there. I was just in Maryland Friday. I gave the khutbah there, and I'm somebody sent a message on my Facebook page. It was like, you need to bring up the issue of the young girl who committed suicide. That was the first I heard about it. So I figured while I was there in Maryland, why don't I bring up the discussion? And after my lecture was over, I'm asking the brothers, like, please let me in. Like, what happened? And man, subhanAllah, man. You know what I mean? It's sad. And we don't say anything.
Where was that? At Dar es Salaam, Al-Huda School? Or?
No, I think it was in
not Al-Huda. It was another smaller school. I'm forgetting the name of it.
Okay.
All right. Well, Imam Shaheed, I know you got to run. We still got a lot to talk to you about. So, inshallah, we'll bring you on soon again. You know what I mean? Really enjoyed this conversation. Man. How can our listeners, find out more about you? As you mentioned, you mentioned you kind of create your own platform. Alhamdulillah, with Allah's fadl, we've, grown quite quickly in the last year and a half since we've been doing podcasts. So your platform, our platform is your platform.
That's right. Yeah.
MashaAllah.
You're going to be at you're going to be at the conference as well, right?
No, I actually I tapped out of that one for a number of reasons. Okay. One was because the brother who sent me the initial offer, didn't offer to pay me anything, and I'm sorry, I don't fly out. And that's another thing. Like, why would you even feel comfortable? Because I'm nobody. I basically, you're doing me a favor. I was offended. Like, I didn't even respond to the email right away because I'm thinking, like, how do you even come out the side of your face and say, okay, well, we're going to pay for your hotel and your flight, but, we ask for compensation maybe next time, and I'm like, I don't even need your platform though, dude. You're not doing me a favor. Like, with all due respect, I appreciate the invite, but would you have asked Yasser Qadhi, would you have asked Hamza Yusuf to come to Texas for free? These guys get paid. I'm not even going to tell. You don't want me to put their stuff on blast. These guys get paid in the tens of thousands, man, to show up and do, in 1 hour lecture. You know what I'm saying? A 1 day event. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm nobody, and that's cool. But at the same token, I still have my platform that I'm not really in need of. I'm not really in need of that. So that was. I responded back and I said, with all due respect, I appreciate it. And I said, may Allah reward you. And that was pretty much it. And I tried to be as respectful as I possibly could under those circumstances.
I'm aware of that, those honorariums, because there's a masjid that I work with locally that they're not the richest masjid around, but they wanted to invite one of these big dogs. And I was like, that's going to be like $10,000, right? You know what I mean? For a 45-minute talk. Your community is going to lose their mind if they find out that you spent $10,000 on a 45-minute speech, right, and y'all can't even afford air conditioning.
Right. And I've seen it. Even right here in Delaware. We just had, Yasser Qadhi was just here about 3 weeks ago. And while they come to me and they say, Brother Shaheed, are you free today? Can you give the khutbah today? And there's no discussion of money. I'm almost positive Yasser did not come here. With all due respect to him, he's a businessman, and I respect that. But I'm almost positive he didn't come here and do that for free. But you'll ask me, because I live right around the corner from the masjid, Brother Shaheed, can you give the khutbah tomorrow? And I'm like, no. I'm not just free walking around, I don't have nothing to do on Friday, right? You know what I mean? Like, right. I don't travel around the world, on Friday. Who am I? What was I thinking? But I'm sure Yasser Qadhi didn't come here for the one night, and this was on a Sunday night. School is the very next day. I stopped in to just give him salams, but I got there. He had just started when I got there, so I was a little late. And it was a packed house. Packed house. They did it at a public school auditorium. A packed house on a Sunday night, man. MashaAllah. And I'm sure they paid some thousands of dollars for that to happen. You know what I mean? But you'll reach out to me and say, well, as for an honorarium, we can't give you one. You didn't even say, we got a couple of $100, we're small this or small that, and we can, it's like, you just send me an email, we can pay for your flight, and we can, and then to put all of these stipulations in the contract, we get to keep the recording, and we're able to sell it and do it as we wish, and I'm just like,
oh my God.
Black da'is matter, right?
Yeah, we got some work to do for sure on that end, for sure. Like, I know there's a lot of
students of knowledge matter, right? Yeah, it was, I just, number one, I kind of I toyed with the idea, do I even really need that platform? Is it even worth it? Because I personally, I hate traveling, man. The whole hotel, get there, drop your bags off, and then you get home, you're missing your kids, and you FaceTiming your family. I really dread that, honestly. I mean, when I first started back in 2004, 2005, traveling around, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I looked forward to it. At this point, when I get someone that's an email that come in, actually, when we first started, I was responding to an email for an event in September. You understand? And I'm just like, all right, can we do this in one day so I can get back home? Like, I hate being gone for 3 days. We have New Jersey Dawah conference that's coming up. Mashallah, shout out to New Jersey Dawah, NJ Dawah conference that's coming up this weekend. And it's, mashallah, it's a packed house every time in New Jersey. And after the 3 days, man, I'm just exhausted. Not physical, just mentally. I'm just drained. That takes a toll on you over the years. I've been doing this since 2004, traveling around giving dawah. It's now going into 2018. I'm tired. I'm saying I'm tired. So I didn't decline the offer, simply based upon the money. I also looked at, do I really need this? Do I really need this at this point in my life, at this particular time? But like to just say, hey, we don't have an honorarium, and maybe next time. But the way you present yourself, it's not that I do what I do for money. But number one, I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. This is how I feed my family. This is how I sustain my life. Not only that, I do have charitable things that I do. You know what I mean? But let me decide when I want to do something for charity. You don't decide that for me. I decide that. I decide, hey, if you would have said, we're a small community, we don't really have a lot of money, what is your honorarium? And I would have responded back, well, if you could do this, then that would be great. If not, don't worry about it. I'll still come for free. I decided that. You don't decide that for me. You understand what I'm saying? Like, if I'm going to give sadaqah and I'm going to do something fi sabilillah, then let me decide when I do that. You don't force my hand to do that by telling me you're not going to give me this or that.
Sheikh, we want to thank you for coming on, and let me say, and maybe the brother has something else to say, but I just wanted to say that how deeply needed it is that we have someone come and hold a mirror up to our faces and to say, this is what you are. And I just want to say for myself, Jazakumullah khair, for having the courage and the adab, the beautiful manners in advising us for that.
Yeah, I like the second Ismail's thought as well. And like, what's the best way for people to like find out about you on social media? I assume it's just Imam. I know you've got the Rawdah, Rawdah.
Yes, Rawdah.info is the email address. I mean the website. You can also find me on Facebook, Shaheed Muhammad /Rawdah admin. And then I have another Facebook page, Rawdah, just Rawdah. And then my Instagram page, Twitter page, Shaheed_M76. There's a couple of pages that have been created recently that weren't created by me. There were other people who created these pages and they called it Shaheed, and they're just tweeting out all types of crazy stuff. My official, like, it's like almost like you're a celebrity, so you got to say the official Shaheed page, right? So my page that I tweet from is Shaheed_M76. Yeah. My Periscope, Periscope is the same handle as the Twitter handle, and SoundCloud, which is where I upload pretty much all of my audios onto SoundCloud. And you just go to Shaheed Muhammad on SoundCloud.
Yeah, and I do recommend everyone listen to the Reclaiming Our Communities. Was a Facebook live video. I wish it was longer. 3 hours went by quick. You know what I mean? I had to stream it on my phone while I was driving on my dashboard, so I could. The main thing you can listen to it. So
it's actually I uploaded it to YouTube too. You can go to my YouTube page. My personal YouTube page is www.rawdah, Rawdah. That's one word, www.rawdah that's my YouTube channel. Or anything else that is posted on YouTube under Shaheed Muhammad was posted by somebody else. Every video that is under www.rawdah, I posted myself. Anything else that's up there, somebody else posted. I'm not responsible for that.
Sure. We can put some links. We can put some links on the Mad Mamluks page, correct?
Yeah, we can.
Yes. What I can do is, we're done. I can go to your WhatsApp, and I'll send you a couple of the links on your WhatsApp, and you can post those, inshallah.
Yes, absolutely. We'll have it all in the show notes, inshallah. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram at themadmamluks. We're also on Facebook. Give us a Facebook like. Follow us on Twitter. For our special guest, Imam Shaheed Muhammad, and for my co-host, Ismail Royer, this is Mahin signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.